Postcast time.
Yay.
Yay. I would let my hair down, but I don't want to. I like the perky ponytail today.
Cute. Very cute today.
We all are cute. Look at us cutenesses.
Well, I'm having a pretty good hair day today.
Mm-hmm.
Rhonda's got the sleek and sultry thing going on. Tina's got the new curls.
Yeah, I just got it cut yesterday by my friend Dora, and she did a really good job. And I didn't do anything to it today. I just woke up. So
your friend Dora, who is my friend Dora too? Same Dora?
Yes, she goes to our church.
I also know Dora. I used to go to co-op with Dora, don't forget.
It's the same Dora, yep.
In fact, Dora, do you remember when I was going to shave my head, I was going to see if Dora would do it because I feel like she would do a good job.
Yes. And Dora was almost related to my kids, but she wasn't. So she's looking for her biological father, and she had a picture of her mom with my kid's uncle. And she thought that he might be her dad, and they did a DNA test, and he wasn't. But so I knew her like way before co-op or anything like that because of that. Because somehow we were friends on Facebook. I'm not even really sure how. And she put this picture up and said, "Does anybody know this guy?" And I was like, "Oh, I know that guy."
Wow.
So small world.
Small world.
But she's really great. Everybody should go get Dora to do their hair.
Dora Gill. What is the name of her haircut place? We should put a link.
J.C. Penney's at the Cortland Center.
Oh, she's at the Cortland Center.
Not to be confused.
Eastland.
You gotta watch both the podcast and the postcast back to really get our jokes. We're hilarious, just saying.
We don't even try.
Maybe we should try a little harder. Oh, ladies, who goes first today?
Oh my goodness, I forgot to do the randomizer. Let me do that right now.
Randy Miser has not been summoned yet?
No.
I'm fighting
you guys
urge right now to have a piece of gum. I want some gum really bad right now, and I don't know why, but
I have some.
I do too, but I chew gum.
Send it to you through
this cud, so that's not going to be attractive for the podcast. So
it's a postcast.
For future technology, somebody needs to invent like a little contraption that sits next to your computer, and I could put the gum in it, and it would send it to you.
Like a Star Trek beam me up gum Scotty kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Or the Jetsons airmail thing.
I was thinking more like Willy Wonka and the chocolate bar, but
Well, I used to think that, the Jetsons talking to each other by looking at a TV screen and seeing the face was never going to happen. So
here we are.
Right? All right. So random.org. Oh, no, you let me down. I have to be first.
Yay. About time.
And then Jen, Tina, Rhonda is how it turned out. So who wants to talk about, I feel like lately I've been the one saying, so normally here's how we do it. So who's going to be that instead of me? Someone else's voice.
Well, you're the host today. But
okay. So I have to shut up basically, which is really a struggle for me to not talk. And then they're going to talk about my postcast submission piece while I am in a zone of silence. And then they get to talk about it till they're done talking about it. And then I get to come out and address any concerns they have and whatever like that. So I'm just looking for general feedback this time.
And if I've done my job correctly, you should be able to get a copy of what she submitted and read it. And you could even pause us if you wanted and read it first. And then you'll be in the know when we start talking about it.
Yeah. And hopefully you will let us know if you agree or disagree with what people have said, or if you want to add your 2 cents to try to help the author solve a problem that they bring up with or something that they've asked for feedback on. We want your feedback as well. We don't want it to just be an echo chamber of the 4 of us. So anyone who's a patron of the postcast should chime in. All right, so I'm going to be quiet now.
All right. Anyone want to go first?
Wow.
I go first so often.
I really I love the way that she's changing this whole story. The changes that she's made and the things that she's added. The characters have come alive for me. Where they were a little bit flat before.
Agreed.
So it's almost like a new story, and I'm over here and I'm going, no, don't marry him. Even though I know it's going to happen. I know whether or not she's going to marry him and how that's going to go and all that. So,
yeah, I think they did a really good job of making us know Sylvia and then like her, because the first read through of this, the story was interesting, but I didn't really feel invested in Sylvia enough to like kind of care. And now when I got to the end of this, the scene, and Sylvia, like you said, is considering marriage to him, like it just broke my heart for her, because we know what's going to happen, but it just broke my heart because like she was really had all of her eggs in one basket, and that basket married someone else. And so I have to agree with you on that one too. I also would like to say that I really am digging Ramona. Ramona was a very, very, very small character, I think, in the first read of this. And I think that Ramona's character has really kind of, she's fleshed her out a lot more. And I really enjoy reading the relationship between Sylvia and Ramona. And I think that's really well done by the author.
Ramona is an awesome best friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not just a side character anymore.
Right, exactly.
I found in a lot of my favorite books that the side character, if they've got personality, they end up being my favorite character in the book. And I don't know if it's supposed to be like that, but that's the way it is for me. And Ramona's like that. Okay, now, when I read this the first time, or the portion I read, I had the setting idea I had for it was that it was sort of like a dark Gothic, early 18th century vampire kind of setting. You know what I mean? Not that vampires should be part of it, but so have we been told exactly what the setting is? Is it present day?
She's never ever told us. It has always been kind of one of those things that is just kind of floated out there for us to try to like just kind of interpret on our own.
Yeah, I think she's doing some world building. So, like each of the books in the saga of Somerville is a different Somerville, and they're each their own world. So,
right. So,
I think just it's kind of ambiguous, like time and setting.
All right, and I'm okay with that because I love science fiction, like fantasy. I like all those genres. So if she's got a mix of like Renaissance, Gothic, present day, blah blah blah, I'm all for that. So just when she threw the sunglasses in there, I thought, "Am I reading this right? Did I miss something? What?" But anyway, now that I know I can kind of choose my own adventure sort of setting, I'm good with that. But she has worked so hard on this, and I'm so glad she's put all the time in because it's turning into such a great book. It really is.
Yes, the work she has done is awesome. And I know she feels like it's like trudging along and difficult, but she's really doing a great job, and she's getting there. So she should be encouraged.
Yeah, I had a hard time finding meat in this one. I missed the sunglasses thing entirely. So, but I had a hard time finding meat in this. I think it's well in the path of where she needs to be going with this book. So, can't wait to read that part.
Yep. Oh, and when she broke the cookie, I thought, oh man, if those were heart-shaped cookies, she could break one, and that'd be great. And then a smiley face works just as well when I came up to that line.
Yeah. That was great. Anything else?
I don't have any meat, and just a lot of encouragement, and that I like it a lot better. It's just so much improved, and good job, and keep it up.
All right, well, let's let her out of her cage. Jamie?
You're muted, Jamie.
Well, I do appreciate the encouragement is totally needed at this point, and I feel like, hooray. I do want to revisit the sunglasses because although I'm not being really sticky with, well, this is when this was going on, I do wonder if it would be better maybe to have her have a different thing without
Maybe she could have a
saying too
veil.
much. Maybe a veil. Okay, so anyway, but I appreciate that. So I'm really glad that you asked that question. And I mean, what can I say but thanks for the encouragement. And I do hope that the remainder of the book ends up like, so we're chugging along and everything is going kind of fine. And then, I wonder if from here we're going to take a left turn out of the depot or something like that. But so thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so what?
I was just gonna say I can't wait to read. Like, as reading this as a reader, now I'm like, okay, when does she get to see John again? Is she gonna confront him? What does this Ada look like? What is she, like, is she gonna confront her? Like, so that's all good stuff. That I have all these questions and can't wait to get to it. So just
good. It didn't seem too tedious going through. Well, they saw her here and they saw her there. Everything seemed kind of fine.
Yep.
Okay.
It was good. Well
It's thank you. Well, because again, so you get into this mode where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just going on and blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? And so just for someone to tell you, no, it's really fine. You're just kind of in your head is very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I went first for the first time in a long time. And now, Jen, you're up. What kind of feedback are you looking for?
Well, I'm pulling mine up right now to remember what I submitted because I didn't have it last week. So I forgot what I said.
It was the motor car.
Okay.
The guy shows up with his motor car.
All right. So obviously the things that are in caps, I'm still, again, we talked about research today in the podcast, and there are things that those are the cars I think I'm going to use, but I just wanted to kind of see where they fall in the price range. I think that a Buick would have been high end, but not Rolls Royce high end, which is what I was looking for. So that's why there's caps there. Well, I guess what I want to know is, I know that there was some not happiness with the last submission I had because you felt like she should not let a guy look at her like that or whatever, but you were looking at Will's perspective. Now you have Phoebe's perspective, and I just want to know if any of that got cleared up for you, and then your take on Wendell so far. So that's what I'm looking for.
All right, so into the isolation booth you go. And I would be willing to say to Rhonda, I think that our heroine behaves well in this little excerpt. Would you agree?
I do agree.
Does it help you to, like, you like this aspect? Do you think that this is a better side of her to see?
Yeah. And, she's pastorally and upright and all that. And to answer your question, Wendell has boundary issues. So he needs to check it. I will tell you that the line, where is it? I thought I would stop by and see the prettiest woman in the UP. Really? Well, then don't let me stop you from finding her. Okay. I laughed out loud. I love that line. It was so funny. So keep on with it.
Yeah, I like that too. It was very witty.
Yeah. But honestly, I really don't have any meat in this. I don't see how anything could be added or taken away from it. I think it is great the way it is.
I would agree. The only need I had was that dinner lasted all afternoon. Like, is the tense right there? If she's supposed to say that dinner had lasted all afternoon, like that's a little awkward there in that second paragraph or whatever. But that was just a little thing that tripped me up. The rest of it is like story moving forward. And so Wendell, though, can one of you two tell me who he, like, is this the first, who is he? Is he the guy that was on the train?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She met him while traveling.
Okay.
For some reason, I thought it was a boat. Was there a boat involved? Like they were going, Mackinac
go
Bridge
across-
wasn't there yet,
Yeah.
and they were going across on a ferry.
Mhm.
I know he was
Yeah,
on
and
the
like he
ferry.
was leaving his mother behind, and he seemed so young to her and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Wendell Jackson, isn't that like a famous person, or like why
I
is
don't
that
think
name Wendell Jackson?
It kind of sounds like Michael Jackson.
I want to say it's like a tax preparation.
Hewitt Jackson.
Jackson Hewitt.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So Tina or Rhonda, we're going to have.
Well, I'm not really sure what Rhonda is referring to, and she says Wendell has boundary issues. Well, I like Wendell.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'm interested in the rest of his story.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Wendell says certain things like, I didn't underline these. Let's see. You know, calling her the prettiest woman, and assuming you can call her by her first name, and saying, "Oh, well, doesn't Will call you by your first name?" You know, those sort of things is what I'm referring to. So, I mean, he's a good. I liked it, so I'm not saying that she should change it in any way.
It's just telling about who he is and how he was brought up, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out what it was. It's Kendall Jackson makes Chardonnay, and in my life as a waitress, I remember. So I'm thinking of Kendall Jackson. That's what that was. So as never mind. In other words, goodness, I did not notice his familiarity. I guess if I were the author, I would revisit that then, because I don't know that stuff about like how he should be talking. And I mean, obviously his class, he knows he's not like, you know, like a lady is not right. A gentleman. He knows he's not a gentleman. So
I don't remember enough from her previous encounters with him to know if they got close enough for that formality to, like, maybe she said, "Call me Phoebe." Like, you know, I don't remember. So maybe that's the case.
Well, in the actual writing, though, Phoebe, her reaction tells you that he's. Okay, so where's that?
She got upset with Gregory for calling her Phoebe.
Oh my word! I am using the wrong character. I am so sorry. Everything I said about Wendell. Okay, put that on Gregory. Okay.
Yeah, well, we all know Gregory has issues.
Sorry, it's been a week.
I know, because I was looking in this and I'm like, I don't see him addressing her. So I see.
My bad. I am so sorry.
Gregory just needs to get in his Buick and keep going.
Yeah, we don't like
him. Not come back. So
okay, so Wendell, he is a great kid. I am really looking forward to having him in the book. I'm so sorry, Jen.
Characters have feelings too, Rhonda. You owe him an apology.
Yeah, I tried to look at these digitally this week instead of printing everything out, and I'm not doing that again because I'm missing a couple of my notes. So I apologize. Wendell's a great kid. I like him a lot. I would hire him.
I'm like, look, Rhonda, don't be dissing my Wendell now.
All right. So do we have anything to add to this? I want the author to feel encouraged. I mean, just hearing don't give up and keep going, as I think very important at this point. I mean, so I just want to say that to this author. I mean, you know, just keep going through this murky middle time or whatever it is that we're battling, and let's get it done. And then we can move on and write a fun contemporary or something like that. Right.
Right. I agree.
All right. So anything else to say about this before we let her out?
I've said enough.
You sure have.
Come on out, Jen.
This is the worst week ever to be in isolation. Like the whole time, like, and you guys aren't looking at me, and I'm like, what? Like,
I know. I was the whole time I was trying to figure out what Rhonda was talking about.
Like, and I was like trying to telepathically say to Tina.
Like I'm actually reading through it, like trying to find what she's talking about. I was like, what?
I was too. I'm like, when did he call her by her first name? Like, I know he called Will by his first name, and Phoebe was like, but I did that on purpose. I was trying to show the relationship between Will and Wendell is a step above just being him being the the constable and Wendell being this kid in the town. So
I do like that they have the shared experience of losing their dad at the same age. I love that.
Yes, and that Phoebe acknowledged it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's great.
And I didn't get a chance to mention my the juicy part that I wanted to mention of I wonder if Wendell can not read. Because he wouldn't read that scripture. He said he doesn't like to read out loud.
Oh.
So I'm suspicious. So anyway,
moving on. So Wendell was not on the ferry. That was Parker that was on the ferry. Wendell had lunch the first day. The first leg of their trip, they had lunch. I know it's been a long time. If you were like reading this like a regular novel, it would have been a lot less time period between this. But the ferry trip, that would have been when she met Gregory Parker, the one that
okay.
Right. So yeah. Other than that, so remember, he's the one he didn't have hardly any lunch, and they shared their lunch with him.
Yes.
And he ran up and got water for them. Okay. And,
does he show up again before this point?
He's mentioned before this point. And yes, he's at the church. Will talks to him briefly. Right after Will meets Parker, he asks him if he knows this guy, so they talked briefly. So you do see him, yeah, but just like in little bits.
So, it won't be so like, who is this?
Right.
Right.
And it's only been, let's pull out the board here. Let's see. It's only been like 3 chapters or so since we like met him. So we meet him, and then a few chapters later, and we see him at one point in there. And so, yeah. So yeah, so I really appreciate all of that feedback, even yours, Rhonda. That was entertaining. Thank you.
You had us all thrown for a loop. Are you reading the same story?
All right. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Okay. So what did I say? What happened to Randy?
I'm next.
All right. What we see on your little description, what kind of feedback you want.
Can I ask a quick question before you go into isolation? You have 2 words that are highlighted, one in yellow and one in orange.
Yeah, that's because of I have Pro Writing Aid connected to my Word, and they wanted me to not use those words, and I made the decision to use them anyway. And when I printed it, it was still highlighted. I didn't turn it off.
It didn't laced. That's weird.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I ignored it.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Enough out of you. Just kidding. All right. So I think it's funny. This is not autobiographical, except okay, so let's not get into things too much, except for, there were some things until about page 2 that I was like, she is lying. This is so
Yep.
Until you see that the husband was like,
the
husband would never play into it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm with you on that one.
So I do not like the fact that I felt like I was given an assignment this time before I read it. I really wish that I would have just been able to read it and then have her ask me the question, because I don't know how to answer the question, because it's kind of like, don't think about pink elephants, right? And then that's all that you think about is pink elephants. So I can't find an authentic answer to her question.
Because we were looking to see if we were hooked, as opposed to just truly being hooked by it.
Yes, and
put our thing at the end instead of the beginning, what we're looking for.
Maybe I just struggled because I know Tina's writing is good, and what I've realized about myself is that I will read anything in any genre if I like the writing. And so I know I'm going to like Tina's book. I'm going to read this whether it hooks me or not, because I know that it's going to be good writing. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't know, am I not the right candidate for having to be hooked by what she wrote? But I have to say that I don't know that trying to unlock a church is a hook. Am I supposed to be hooked by the first paragraph? Am I supposed to be hooked by the end of the first page? Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
That was my first thought too, and I probably wouldn't have been looking for that if she hadn't asked. I hadn't really thought about the fact that she'd asked us, but my first thought was that first paragraph is not your hook paragraph. It wasn't until she could hear the voices behind the closed door. So it depends on how long this is going to be. I might actually enjoy this more if we can hear the voices behind the closed door as she struggles to hold all the stuff she's holding. Like, I don't care that she's walking through the door. I don't care. Like, if you're struggling to hold your purse and takeout orders, we know you've just come in. Like, you don't walk around for an hour around the church holding the takeout, right? So maybe if
You
she got
don't.
to it sooner, yeah, Rhonda does. So maybe that would be. But like Jamie said, if you hadn't asked me, I would have kept reading, and I probably would have been really hooked. I know I was really hooked by the time I got to that paragraph. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, so for sure, yes, I got hooked. Could you do it sooner and pull me in faster? Possibly.
What do you think, Rhonda?
Well, I know you're supposed to try to hook the reader in the first, I don't know, so many words. But I read recently that that's only a new rule that people just out of the blue came up with. And generally, if you were hooked in the first chapter, they assumed that people were going to give the book a few pages. And so it didn't have to be immediately. It could be within the first 1,000, 1,500 words. So I wasn't looking for the hook in the first short section, but I will tell you, by the end of it, I am 100% hooked. In fact, when I got to the end of it, I was like, wait, because remember I did this digitally? I went back to check to make sure I had all the pages because I wanted to read more of this. I was 100% hooked. And I can't tell you exactly where it was that I was hooked at.
Well, and she's reading a book right now that is supposed to teach you how to hook your readers. But you and Tina both read something that I submitted to an anthology, and the critique was that I didn't hook the people, and that if I don't drop them right into the middle of action, like they need to be in a battlefield shooting at aliens or something, or short story readers are going to drop it like a hot potato. Now, see, that's what made me think maybe I'm an anomaly, because again, if I like the writing and I'm not rolling my eyes at the cliches, I keep reading because I want something to read and I want to like the writing. So you're saying, Rhonda, I'm not an anomaly, and that I guess it just depends on what kind of audience you're writing for, right? I mean, if you're writing to people who want to shoot 'em up battlefield alien story, then you have to do that.
Right.
Jen, do you have thoughts?
I think our world has changed a lot too. I mean, we live in a Netflix binging world, and people
instant gratification.
Instant gratification. I think that's where that advice comes from, is that our world has changed so much, and that's why a lot of people don't read the classics anymore, because the classics don't fit those rules. People are devouring ebooks and the new kind of writing that gets you right into it. So I'm not saying that you can't write a really great book and it be publishable and people enjoy it by breaking those rules. But overall, if you're looking to possibly like hit that sweet spot of like selling lots of books, that's why they give that advice. So, but again, if she hadn't asked, I would have kept going. But since she has asked, I would say maybe if she got to it a little bit quicker. But it's not bad the way she did it. I'm just giving a suggestion.
Correct. If she would not have asked that question and just said, would you keep reading? Absolutely, yes. And again, maybe she's not looking for it to hook me in paragraph 1. So we'll have to wait for her to come out of isolation. The writing is good. The story is intriguing. Yes, I want to read more. So that's all obviously bread. And the meat just depends on where she expects me to be hooked.
Exactly. And I agree. The writing is good. The story is interesting. But one thing I know is I don't like the characters. I don't like either one of them. I don't even like her, because part of me is like, all right, maybe she is the problem. Now, should her husband have shut the door? No, absolutely not. But maybe we don't know the whole story. Maybe she's psycho and it's like a problem, or maybe it is him.
Well, especially with this author, because she has stuck it to us before.
Yeah.
Right? I know. Yeah. Exactly. So for me, like, I think that's a compliment. I mean, to me, it's a compliment. I'm giving her is that I don't like either of these characters, but I still want to read it because I
Yeah.
don't know why I don't like either one of them. And I'm not sure which one I should dislike more.
Yeah. And see, I hadn't made a judgment. I mean, I definitely don't like the husband yet, but on the woman, I hadn't made a judgment yet, whether I liked her or not. But I just knew I wanted to find out if I did.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting question because my sympathy was with the wife. And I think the fact that it's like, this is not autobiographical didn't matter because I was like, this situation is crappy for this wife. So I had sympathy for her. But now that you mention it, I don't have, a like or dislike for her, but the story is carrying it. And enough along to make it to where by chapter 6, I love this heroine or I'm rooting for him or something. So good point there.
Because Tammy could be 78 years old, and the reason her cleavage is falling out is because she's all wrinkly and her shirt is just, old. And like, it could be like, she could be absolutely ridiculous. The door still shouldn't be shut. But anyway, I don't know. Like, that makes me want to keep reading to figure out what is the actual story here. So kudos for that.
Yep.
All right. So I think we should let her out to tell us all about it.
Not that 78 is old.
The older I get, the younger 70 is.
Yes. Right?
All right, Tina.
You're muted, Tina.
Well, it's a good thing I was muted because I talked when I wasn't supposed to. So I wasn't necessarily wanting to hook you in the first paragraph. Just that opening of the story was my hook. And, that whole discussion about dropping you into the action, this book, I'm reading this book called Hooked. That's the name of it. And he says the opposite of that. He talks about melodrama and drama. And so melodrama is like the action and drama is like the internal story problem of the struggle that this internal struggle that the character is going to face in the rest of the book. So he uses the example of Thelma and Louise, where the opening hook is like most people would say it's when Louise shot Harlan because he was trying to rape Thelma. But that's not it. It's the very beginning where her husband is treating her condescendingly, Thelma, and she makes the decision to go on this trip with Louise without asking his permission. And because all her life she's been like controlled and dominated by men. And so she makes that decision, and that decision kind of sets her free. And she's like, so now she wants to go to the honky tonk and flirt, and she flirts shamelessly with this guy. And she just kind of lets it all, like that power of having stood up for herself. And then she kind of, by the end of the movie, her character arc has she's like this bad A chick robbing gas stations by the end of the movie, where at the beginning of the movie, she was like this cowed wife who wouldn't do anything without her husband's permission. And so that's the story-worthy problem. And the hook was the moment that she decided not to ask his permission to go on to the movie or to go on the trip. So that's what I was trying to work on, was having a story-worthy problem that was internal of the character that would also hook the reader.
So I'm just confused, though, by the title of his own book, Grabbing Readers from Page 1. I wouldn't imagine that would be page 1 of the book version of Thelma and Louise, that she's going off on the trip. It seems to me that there's a little bit of a like, you have to see her being abused. You have to see the guy getting shot. That doesn't feel like page 1 to me.
Well, the part where she makes that decision not to ask his permission is like the very first scene. Because she's in the kitchen and she's talking to Louise on the phone, and she says, I don't have to ask him. And then she says his name real sweetly, and he goes, what do you want? And then she goes, never mind. Or she said something else, but she did not ask. So that was like in the opening scene of the movie.
Gotcha.
So that was the inciting incident, I guess, is what it would be. But yeah.
I guess from what you've just explained tells me why I feel more strongly about your second paragraph than I do about your first paragraph, because your second paragraph is about the emotions, the emotional experience.
I actually agree with you.
Carrying, fast food and all that other stuff, which I think is great because it's starting to show us what's happening. But I just feel like it could be like structured a little bit differently. Not that this is bad, but if you just wanted to get to it, like I think it might be better if we're like in her emotions immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on that. I probably, if I was going to write this as a whole book, I would probably do that and start it there.
See, I don't know though, because again, kind of like Rhonda said, I read that paragraph. I did not think, oh, this is so boring, I'm going to put it down. I mean, you know, you pick up a book and I feel like you kind of make a little bit of a contract with yourself that I'm going to invest some time into this book. And so for me, as long as I am not immediately offended by bad grammar or just a big info dump or just terrible writing, I will go through a paragraph of kind of a world building. She's at a church, she has takeout. You know what I mean? Like I'm willing to tolerate that. And so I guess the question is just like again, I'm just irritated that I can't just be an objective here. Like I want to go to Barnes and Noble and hand this out to 5 people and say, is this interesting to you? Now, whether or not it would be better to take the first paragraph out, would I have read it stronger, or to take the first paragraph and just add that she's carrying Chinese food in with it? Would it be stronger? I mean, I guess arguably yes, but I don't know. It's a good question.
Right. To me, this is the same, you know, the story that you referenced of your own earlier. This is just like the setting in your story. A little girl swinging her legs on the toilet. And I was like, oh, what's going on? And that's what I felt about this. Is I guess I need a little bit of setting before I get action thrown in my face.
That's interesting. So I wonder if it's just a reader. I wonder if it's a genre thing. I don't know, Jen, what would you say? Would you say with our current reader climate, it needs to be more?
I think it really is dependent on genre, you know, and this is just the beginning of a story. So I don't know that I can really answer that right now, but other than what I did, I mean, I think if it were me, and it were my story, I would get to it faster. I wouldn't take out that paragraph. I would just restructure everything to where you're hit with the emotion. And I feel like if we're hit with the emotion as she's struggling to balance the lunch that she brought him, I think it'll make it a whole lot more. Right now, I look at that like that's just setting up the setting. But if she were to change the emotion in a different order, and I'm all of a sudden I'm emotionally vested in this, and oh my gosh, and she brought him lunch. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to, okay, she's struggling with a lunch, and then this happens.
One thing that I thought about going back and adding after I had written it and done the editing and stuff was as she pulls in the parking lot and sees that his car and her car are parked next to each other, and they're the only cars in the parking lot.
Oh wow!
And kind of having her emotional reaction to that before she goes in the door. I was playing with that idea in my head too.
That could work if you're careful. You don't want to turn it into an info dump though.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it would be fun to play around with, I think. I do like that idea because like Jen was suggesting, it would introduce, you could then say, you know, she took a deep breath to calm her heart before, right? Like, so.
Because I really wanted her to like set up the lunches on his desk and have it all nice before she realized that they're in her office. So.
Well, I think this is a really valuable discussion to have. And I think, I think that's, I guess maybe I would like to read it the other way also to really know how I feel, I guess. I don't know. But really cool. I'm glad that you brought this to us and we're talking about it.
Good job, Tina.
Thanks.
Very good job. All right. Do you have any other questions for us? Is your back well fed?
Yes.
And again, really good job. I don't know if I gave enough bread about it because I was spending too much time talking about the question at hand, but really great story, great characters. And I do wonder if like a modern person, not a Christian, would understand. If you're following current politics, you know, our current vice president does not ever meet with another woman with his door shut or without another person in the room or kind of whatever. And there are people who actually think that that's a negative on him. Like I don't even understand the other side of the argument. But I just
There are
really
people
wonder.
in the church that think that's a negative.
This is what I'm saying. And I wonder if, I just really am curious as to how, like, would people be like, I don't see what the problem is. Like, to me, this is very important and hurtful to her. And so I get it where she is. So anyway, I digress. All right. So moving on, Rhonda, what do you want to know or hear?
I don't know. I don't really want to restrict you guys. Your comments are valuable, and I don't want you to just focus on one thing. It was just the next scene that we had come up with, and I said, well, got to submit today, so here it is.
All right, into isolation with you then.
Okay.
All right, who wants to say something?
I want to start with some meat right off the bat, like right where it says tomato aspect. I wrote ew. Ew. So that's technically not meat. That's like what, gelled something.
I actually made tomato aspic to try it just because I was so curious about it. I thought, well, it will be cold and refreshing, and I like tomatoes, and I couldn't, because the texture was just not anything, I guess, that I wanted. Like, I don't want tomatoes to be gelatin. I don't know, it was weird. But so it's funny that tomato aspic would come up after I had just recently, I think it was last summer, I tried it. Yucky.
Jen Google's tomato aspic.
It's Jell-O made of tomato juice. It's tomato juice Jell-O, no joke. And I'm thinking, well, I like salsa. I like cold tomatoes in general. I like this. And I just, no. I even put like celery and green peppers in it. No, couldn't.
But that meat is also my bread, part of my bread, because there was a time in American history when all the ladies' magazines and the cookbooks had, like, you could make Jell-O out of anything. Like, they had these molds, and it just takes you back to a period of American history. I don't know if it's like the 60s, 70s-ish in there, where, like, they were just making Jell-O out of everything. I've seen those little hot dogs. What are they called?
Vienna sausages.
I've seen it made out of Vienna sausages, just like such gross stuff that you would not believe. So because she included these details about what they were eating and how they were dressed, it just took you right into the setting like you were there.
I agree. And I've always wanted to have a weird vintage food party where everybody brought something that was like, one of those crazy molds or something. And then you could even have like a prize for the most bizarre thing that actually tasted good, or just the biggest spectacle, because they did really do some strange stuff with food. I think they were so happy that there was no more rationing and no more depression that they're like, how creative can we be with this food?
Yeah.
For a while I was confused as to who Kenny was, but then I remembered he's the brother-in-law.
Yeah, I just loved this whole thing. I loved the characters. I loved how she tried to make Tom jealous. And then she realized she was flirting with this creep.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, and then the only other meat I have is the line that says an imperceptible shiver ran down her spine. If it's imperceptible, how does she know that it ran down her spine? Like, just like the word choice of imperceptible, she might want to like thesaurus that or something and find.
Well, doesn't that mean that other people couldn't see it?
I don't know. I guess that's something the author will have. Because to me, it meant it was imperceptible. It wasn't so. I don't know.
It's different than invisible, right? So
yeah,
no one else would see, but she'd feel it. But yeah,
right.
Well, I disagree with about everything Tina said except for the tomato aspect thing. So I don't want to come off as super negative, but I know that this author really wants like honesty. And as I read this, first of all, I loved the first sentence of the second paragraph. That's my bread right there. I love that she compared it to a blood clot, because I didn't even have to Google it to know what we're looking at. Like all of a sudden I'm like, ugh, and I get it. But the first paragraph is all telling, and I think that just stopped me up from the very beginning. Z and her aunts filled their arms with bowls of food to take outside. Aunt Maribel carried the large potato salad. Aunt Annabelle, blah, blah, blah. I just, like, it was just so telling. So I finished reading it, and I realized one of the things I think that is striking me personally is there are so many characters. In 5 pages, there are 10 characters. So as a reader, I'm having a hard time figuring out who are the important characters and who are just like on the sideline and just kind of there for flavor. Because they're all kind of having almost the same amount of weight, except for Z is obviously it's in her perspective. So we see the most of her. But I counted, there are 10 characters in these 5 pages. And to me, that was kind of a lot. I would have loved that sentence that I love. I would have loved that she would have brought that closer to the front, like kind of like what we talked about with Tina. But I would have loved this to start off with Z stared at the blob of the blood clot disguised as tomato aspect that her aunts just sat on the table. Like, already have us there in that great sentence. We don't have to see them all, what they're carrying. Like, me personally, I felt like it was too much detail. Like, potato, like, we know that it's a food, like, then she could, like, maybe look down and say, the table that they placed on the table full of potato salad, blah, 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 deviled eggs, blah, 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 blah. Like, I didn't need, like, 3 full descriptive sentences for that, unless the food that it was laid out there plays an important role in this scene, which it didn't. Like, if it was going to show up later and it was important that we know what food was there, otherwise it shouldn't be your opening paragraph. It should not be what we're looking at first, I feel like. Aunt Maribel and Aunt Annabelle, unless they're going to be important characters in the scene, like, I think they could have been just kind of like mentioned that our aunts were there. I don't know. But again, we're reading these things really separated out instead of reading it as a book, right? So it's hard for me to like remember who is who from everything we've read. I stumbled on Kenny as well, and then she introduced a new guy, and I was like, wait, have we met him before? And then realized that we hadn't, and I couldn't remember if it was Kenny or Tom that she went on a date with at first. But again, that's because I'm not reading it like a real novel. But I think that if there were less characters mentioned in each scene, that it would be easier for me to track.
Well, I would like to speak to your meat, but not before I give some bread. I do want to say that when the author does description, she does it in a way that I appreciate. Like, there's really not a whole lot of describing the colors of the meadow and blah. It's just very much like, I love her level of description personally. I love the voice. I think I love the story, and I am very invested. So, but I do want to speak to your meat, because I have to say that it really put the finger on where I was having trouble with this, but couldn't exactly figure out kind of why. And I did also hearken back to your criticism of, I think, a couple of submissions ago, like, what is the focus of this paragraph? What are we supposed to, like, the focus is too broad. Like, if the deal is this flirting and introducing this flirty guy, like you said, Jennifer, we don't need so much description about this picnic or potluck or kind of whatever it is. I mean, basically you could say, the next family picnic gathering, this thing happened, right? Like, so a little bit of the flavor, like you said, mentioning the blood clot aspect and the weird recipes is enough, like 1 paragraph. And then jump into the Yahoo. Is it important that Kenny built a barbecue pit and blah, and blah, And I think on the one hand, it's kind of like your stories about Phoebe where she went bass fishing or whatever. And you're like, but this is all really cool and interesting. And it is cool and interesting how you would build a barbecue pit out of bricks. And then, it would then be, this is how you would barbecue the food. But for this story, all it does is kind of clutter up the chapter, right? So it isn't that the writing is bad or that there's anything not interesting about that particular fact, but it just kind of makes you feel like you're you don't have the focus of what's going on. And I couldn't put my finger on what my meat was until you said that. And I do think it's talking too much about too many characters, and they all get equal screen time, right?
Yes, right.
So it'd be enough to say her aunts put bowls of food on the table. There was a grill, you know?
Right.
So I just want to say that I guess my meat would echo yours. But I wouldn't say that the writing is bad or that the story isn't engaging. It's just too broad of a focus for one chapter.
And I don't know, I absolutely agree. And I don't know if it's because we're reading it so slowly and we don't have all the pieces. And I probably should go back and read everything all together, boom, 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 boom. But I'm not sure we have everything all together. I don't know. I think we've jumped around a little bit. But like you mentioned, like, what's the purpose of like this piece of reading? I don't know what the purpose of the story is yet. Like, and I don't know that we've gotten to it. Like, is it going to be like, is someone gonna get injured because the car was messed with, or is this a romance? Or like, I feel like we're getting lots of like story without much plot yet. And it might be because maybe it's just me. Maybe it's because we're reading it so slow. I don't know. Do you guys like, I don't know. I don't know what we're supposed to be getting out of the story so far.
I understand what you're saying, because so there's some strange, funny business going on with him in the car. I do think reading it edge to end would be helpful, but like you said, if it's supposed to be kind of like a mystery book and not so much a romance book, then that chapter of Tom meeting the parents isn't as important and is maybe not necessary at all, except for that it introduces Nettie. Like, I understand what you're saying. I guess we can have a discussion with the author when she comes out and find out.
And again, not bad writing. She's a good writer. Mm-hmm. You know, I just think that like there's some story structure issues possibly. But again, maybe if I read it all together, I wouldn't feel that way, as opposed to it being like, you know, split up. But
yeah, and I think maybe to address our me, if the author just thought more Bobby Sock, pippity poppity, writing, and less like Old South describing the summertime barbecue, because I feel like that's where she's writing beautiful, like, oh, picture this big grand barbecue, but that's not where we're at. We're at like 50s poodle skirts, fun and hopping, right? I don't know.
Yes. Hey, I just had a thought. Do you remember when you told me the chapter I was struggling with? You told me snowflake this chapter and then write it again.
Yeah.
That might be a good idea for her, because I think that if she were to snowflake all the things that happen and then pull out really what is it that is important in this story. So you have Z stare, like we start off with Z at the food table staring at the blood cut that just got set down next to potato salad and the deviled eggs. And then she looks up past Kenny, who's over top of the grill that he just made, and she sees Tom. But she also knows is Nancy. What is Nancy doing talking to him? Hey, Z. And she turns and there's Larry. Like, boom, boom, boom. There's the chapter, right? Am I right? That's kind of what the chapter was. But to be honest, like by the end of the first reading, I didn't know what was important in the chapter. I had to read it again to figure out. Like when Tina said that she really liked how she was like, oh, why am I flirting with this creep? Honestly, that really didn't clue into me that she like had that realization. But then I went back and looked when Tina was talking, I realized, oh yeah. And I think that probably was supposed to be the important part, but there were so many characters and so many details that it didn't get the weight that it needed in that chapter. So.
All right. So should we let her out to address?
Well, I just wanted to say that all that description of the picnic didn't bother me at all. Like it did you guys. It kind of, there's these books that I've read in the past about a pastor and his wife. I think they're like a Presbyterian minister and his wife in this little town somewhere in the Midwest. And it's kind of a mystery, probably cozy mystery. And they spend a lot of time talking about the details of their everyday along with, and it kind of has that feel to me, and it didn't bother me. So,
but don't the details play into the story later? Like
not necessarily. It just gives you the flavor of their lives and the setting and the way things work in that town and what the characters do, and you know, it adds more of the flavor of the setting than necessarily carrying the story along.
Well, I would then say that as a compromise, I would leave everything but take out all this thing about how he built a barbecue pit and talked about the mortar joints and blah, 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 because he's a brother-in-law. And unless someone's going to burn something up in that barbecue pit where it's important how it was constructed, I think that that was too much. I think if she at least took out that paragraph, because I'm like, who's Kenny? Oh, yeah, that's the brother-in-law. That would be my compromise, because I mean, I could agree with you that some people would want to hear the details of this picnic, just like with your Armistice Day parade or whatever it was, Jen, you know, how you struggle about how much detail do you put in there.
Right.
So that to me would be a compromise that would work, I think.
I wouldn't miss it, the barbecue part, but I really like the description of the picnic. It really brought me into the time and the setting.
All right.
So,
and I wasn't saying get rid. You guys understand? I wasn't saying get rid of all of that. I was saying okay.
It's just the general critique, if I'm hearing you right, is that the chapter lacks a focus, and so it's kind of hard to know what was important in the chapter.
I would say that's what my critique.
And so we're just thinking less description of the picnic might help you get to the point faster. That's why you were talking about shortening that.
Right. Or
it was just a suggestion of how to focus the chapter. Yes.
All
right. So come on out, Rhonda. What do you have to say?
Okay. Each and every one of you has been so helpful for this whole thing. Okay. So, Tina, thank you for being a Cozy Mystery fan. I really appreciate everything you said. Now, the barbecue pit, I completely agree with you. I almost cut it out a few times, but I thought, well, Mom really liked that paragraph, so I'll just leave it in. So we'll put that on the blog or something. I don't know. But the setting was important to us. And in this part of the book, there were a lot of characters that needed to be introduced. It's sort of like playing a game of Clue, where you've got the 5 suspects, but you don't know which one it is, but then it could be somebody else coming in too that is the murderer. So you need to introduce a lot of people quickly in the book. So it was kind of hard for us to do it without having at least a paragraph about everybody. And then there are a few people who come out a little bit later. And there are things that we describe that are important. And I'll just tell you, the barbecue pit now is not one of them. They'll be having barbecues probably more, but, no. So we can take that out. Now, we have more happening at the barbecue. And we were trying to decide if it was a second scene or if it's just like the 3 dots and then time lapse and then continue on. And that's going to have to be what it is, because certain people are focused on more in that section. And there's only 3 viewpoints, I think, or not viewpoints, but 3 people mentioned in the rest of this. So I guess we'll put those together and figure out who we can gloss over. But we've got to balance that with
representing a cast of
cast.
Yes, correct.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, is that me?
I don't know. It's gone now.
Okay.
So to Jen's point though, do we care what aunt so-and-so carried and what aunt so-and-so carried? And I will say, I may not be a Cozy fan, but I just went through an Agatha Christie, and she had everybody having their tea out in the back lawn so she could introduce everybody. And she didn't talk about what was being served, and she didn't talk about what kind of plates or the bone china or any of that stuff. She just basically said, tea was being served, and this person said this to this person, and I was introduced to this person. And so I'm just saying, I would just say that I still think that the critique can serve you, unless
absolutely.
Aunt Maribel is a suspect, and what specifically she's carrying. Do you know what I mean? So
Yep.
So what do you think
I will
about?
tell you, the aspic is something that's going to
Important.
be used. Yes.
Yeah, and we all love
most-
it.
Right. And we weren't sure if we should just mention the tomato aspic and then nothing else, because we don't want everybody to know immediately that watch for the aspic, see what happens, you know what I mean?
Got it.
It would
So
stick
that's
out
what the
too
struggle
much.
was. Exactly.
Well, see, I wouldn't have thought that
I
myself.
wouldn't
because
either.
Now, I have a quick question though. When you first started writing this, didn't you tell us that it was going to be a romance? It's
It
now a
was.
cozy mystery. Okay.
Yeah, because the reason we came to that decision is because the rest of the series are definitely cozy mysteries, maybe with like people liking each other or something. But then I thought, should our newsletter giveaway be a romance if none of the other books we're writing is a romance?
Right. I think it's a good
So
choice.
thank you. That's why it changed.
That's the same problem I ran into with my Chugiak story.
Yeah.
I can't use it as a magnet because it's not the same genre.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is like? What is the focus of the chapter? What I mean is
this isn't the whole chapter. It's just we had it labeled as the first scene, so there'd be 3 scenes in the chapter. So there's this, and then the actual game of horseshoes would be the second scene, which isn't going to be a scene. It's going to be just 3 dots, and then another 3 dots, and then a scene with Tom after the game and kind of reliving it and kind of pointing out certain things that he remembered from the barbecue. Does that answer what you're asking?
maybe I feel like you're hedging because you don't want to give away a plot point.
Well, if I've got a fan here, I don't want to tell her everything.
Right,
I like it when
exactly.
you pick them out.
I like to figure it out on my own. Don't tell me.
Yeah. Yes.
You already gave away the aspect part.
Yeah, because here's the thing. To me, it's like, well, first they go to a picnic, and then we watch them play a game of horseshoes, and then we watch someone tell us about a game of horseshoes. So unless someone is murdered by horseshoe, I don't think I care to hear somebody tell me about a horseshoe game. This is kind of what I think Jen is. But I think this is kind of what Jen is getting at. Like, why are we reading all of this? Like, I mean, I understand you're kind of hinting around that some of it will serve us later. And I guess it's just like, I don't want to feel like I'm walking around a hedge maze trying to like grab onto what I'm following, what story am I following, right? And so
I should have ordered it like, so there are 3 separate portions of the chapter. So this first one is very wide, like you're talking about now, and then the middle one is pretty focused, and then the last portion is extremely focused.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So now this is a cozy.
Yep.
Okay.
And so then if I knew I was reading a cozy mystery, I would be reading this whole chapter trying to decide what's a clue and what's not a clue, and who's acting suspicious and who should I file away for possible suspects, because somebody's going to kill somebody, and we're going to have to try to figure out who it is. So I would go into reading this with that in mind, and so all these little details I would be filing away.
Good. That's what we want. But I do agree with everything you guys said, that it should be whittled a little bit. So barbecue portion is gone, and we'll maybe not combine a person or 2, but and also this is the introductory book for an entire series of books. We'd like to do 10 as our goal for right now.
I think that's great. I mean, you get people invested. I love Nettie, and then I guess that's also it too. So, like, is the Z story or is it Nettie's story? And I understand you're trying to cahoot them up and partner them up.
Well, if you watch say you're watching Murder, She Wrote, and you've got Jessica Fletcher, she is always right there. So she's the main character. But then you also have should be the protagonist, I guess. And the main character would be the person who isn't murdered, but she might be the main suspect that
Come
Jessica
serve
is
for
trying
help
to,
or whatever.
yeah, right. So that would be the Z character.
But Jessica carries the show. She's in almost every scene. She's clearly like the
Yep.
which I'm having trouble finding that. I guess,
Yes.
in the story.
Well, we specifically added Nettie to this to get her into the scene for that very reason.
So who is the heavy hitter in this? Is it Z or Nettie?
Nettie is going to be playing the.
She's Jessica.
Yeah.
This is, I think, at the crux of the whole thing, because I loved that Nettie chapter. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I wonder what this barbecue would look like written from Nettie's perspective. Could she witness the encounter over the punch bowl? Could she know how Z feels about tomato aspect and kind of be giggling about it because she always called it a blood clot? I mean, because I think maybe that's also me looking at this as like it was this romance about Z and Z's perspective. I think that really hits it on the head, that this is not feeling like a Z or a Nettie book. It's feeling like Z's story. And I don't know if in Murder, She Wrote, it was ever told from anybody's perspective but Jessica's.
Yeah, there'll be scenes with things happening without Jessica. Not very many and not in every episode. But also, I think part of the problem, too, is that since this did start out as a romance, Z was the main character.
Yeah.
And you probably have that picture of the book in your mind still from the.
Yeah. So for sure. Yep. All right. So is your back well fed? Any other questions for us?
No, I've got a list of things to look at today.
And I've got to say, I mean, I don't know if you saw the suggestions that I sent to you before. If I were to do the same treatment to this, I would have way fewer of those types of suggestions.
Okay.
Like it's really been, it flows in a good order. Is great, like really, really good writing.
Good. Awesome. Glad to hear that.
All right. So if that's that, I think we are done today. So anything that you all want to tell any of our patrons, I guess, or any insights to what's going on or what's new? Jen, how long before we get another book out of you? I can't remember. You got your book back from the editor or something, didn't you?
No, not yet. I got a portion of it back from the editor. So yeah.
I'm trying to encourage you because
it's supposed to be May.
Okay.
That goal is May, early May. So
how are you feeling about that?
I'm feeling pretty good about that one. It's book 3 that I'm gagging over. So
yeah, I hear you. So Tina, what are you're taking a little break. You'll be editing Lost, come here real soon.
Yeah, starting the 1st.
Are you still writing something with your daughter? Weren't you doing Adventures in Odyssey type treatment or something?
Well, I'm waiting on her. She's really busy, so I don't know when she's going to be able to get to it.
Yeah, and she's not someone who's like, I'm going to make writing office hours and be committed to doing this project, right?
Not a priority for her.
Gotcha.
She's a program director for a campground, and summer camps are coming up right around.
Oh, yeah.
And she's trying, they've been going to all the vet to hire people to be their counselors, and she's coming up with program ideas. And so she's just got a ton of stuff on her plate right now.
Busy.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. It might be fall before she gets to it.
So between now and April 1st, are you going to maybe be trying to write some little shorts or just working on this book?
That's what I've been doing. I've been taking what I'm learning in this book that I've been reading and just playing around with ideas.
Fun.
I have another idea too that's kind of similar to this one that I might submit for next week. So.
Any more on your Civil War story, or is that backburnered?
I put that on the back burner for now. I need to really sit down and do some outlining. Well, I have these other projects I need to get done, and
I will tell you that. So in my binge reading mode that I'm in right now, I read Uncle Tom's Cabin on an audiobook. The guy did a masterful job with the voices. Like, it was so good. And it was really, really cool. It made me think about you and how you're trying to write that sort of a piece. And so anyway, I recommend it to you if you haven't read it. Yeah.
I put it on my list for books. I actually have a list of books from that time period to read. but I'm waiting until I'm actually in the process of doing or about to do the writing, because I don't want it to mess up what I'm currently, like, because Lost is a completely different world.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to bleed over, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah, Tom's Cabin is actually number 1 on my list to go back and reread it.
What, Jen?
She's go back and watch some more Baskin native dancing. Right space, right, Tina?
Yeah.
I have to say it was really interesting because before I read Uncle Tom's Cabin, I read The Way of All Flesh. And it was interesting because The Way of All Flesh is basically condemning and satirizing the Victorian morals of the society. And it was basically criticizing Christian upbringing because the idea was that all Christian parents were super severe and unloving and all of this kind of thing. So it was really interesting then to jump right in Uncle Tom's Cabin, where it was like, Christianity is the way to go. I mean, it was really bizarre to be sort of propagandized from one extreme to the other. Do you know what I'm saying? And of course, because of my own worldview, I was more receptive to Harriet Beecher Stowe's preaching on, the importance of trusting in Christ and all of that. But it's funny because as you read reviews of both works, you can see that we are persuaded by our current worldview. I mean, if we've been harmed by religion and we want to throw it off, we're going to be more inclined to be in favor of works that are very critical. But I will say that in spite of the fact that I did appreciate more being proselytized to by Harriet Beecher Stowe, I mean, her writing was just clearly superior, and her storyline, like there was a storyline. So I will say it was by far the better of the 2 books, by far, no question. So that's all I have to say. Rhonda, what do you want to say before we go?
You're muted, Rhonda.
Apparently she wants to say nothing.
I really have nothing to say. You guys have said it all.
All right. Okay, so I guess that's it for this time. You guys all be good out there. Tell your friends. Join the Postcast. And let us know if you agree or disagree with our critique. The pieces are there for you to read as well. So until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.